Welcome to Human and Time. Settle into whatever position feels comfortable and allow the noise around you to soften for a while. If these quiet journeys through the past bring you some peace, you can leave a like and subscribe to join us again. For now, there is nothing else to do. We are going to Florence. But not the Florence that waits for us in museums. Not yet. There is no famous portrait hanging behind glass. No crowd gathering before the face of a woman whose name most of the world will one day forget. There is no Louvre, no legend, no mysterious smile. There is only a city. And somewhere within it, in the summer of 1479, there is a newborn child named Lisa. She has entered a Florence already old enough to carry many generations beneath its roofs. Stone streets run between houses whose upper windows look down into narrow spaces of movement and trade. Wooden doors divide the public city from the quieter world of the household. Bells cross the distance between churches. The Arno moves beneath its bridges, carrying water through a city that depends upon it and lives beside it without ever fully controlling it. On the 15th of June, Lisa Gherardini is born into this world. Her father is Antonmaria di Noldo Gherardini. Her mother is Lucrezia del Caccia. The Gherardini name belongs to an old Florentine family, one with land and memory behind it. But Lisa is not born into the effortless abundance that the age's most magnificent palaces might suggest. Her family's position is more complicated than that. Respectability can survive even while wealth becomes uncertain. A name can remain old while money grows thin. Land can connect a family to its past without guaranteeing ease in its present. These are distinctions a newborn cannot know. Her first world is smaller, a room. Cloth, warmth, the movement of women nearby. The sound of a door opening somewhere beyond her. Perhaps this is one of the safest ways to approach a life for which so few private words survive. Not by pretending we know what Lisa remembered, but by looking carefully at the world that would have surrounded a Florentine child of her place and time. A cradle in such a world might be wooden. An infant could be wrapped in linen and swaddling bands, held within a household where birth was both intimate and deeply social. Women surrounded the beginning of life mothers, female relatives, attendants, midwives, and, in many urban families, wet nurses whose labor formed part of the complicated geography of childhood. We do not need to decide which hands held Lisa on any particular morning. It is enough to hear the household awakening around children like her. A shutter is unlatched. Weak daylight reaches into an interior much darker than the rooms we know today. It does not flood every corner at once. It enters gradually, catching the edge of a wooden chest, a folded piece of linen, the rim of a ceramic vessel. Somewhere yesterday's embers are disturbed. Ash shifts. Dry wood catches. The fire begins again. Florentine houses are not uniformly warm. Heat gathers close to its source, while stone, plaster, wood, and shadow retain the coolness of rooms farther away. In winter, clothing and bedding matter as much as flame. Wool blankets, linen sheets, curtains around a bed, layered garments, and portable braziers create small islands of comfort rather than the invisible, even warmth of a modern house. And light behaves in much the same way. A lamp or candle does not illuminate an entire chamber. It creates a circle. Beyond that circle, furniture fades. The household is made of these small territories: the warm place beside the hearth, the brighter patch near a window, the darker stair, the bed enclosed by cloth, the chest whose key belongs to someone responsible for what lies inside. Objects carry weight here. A cassone is not merely decoration. A wooden marriage chest can hold textiles, clothing, valuables, and the material evidence of family arrangements. Linen is not simply fabric. It is labor, cleanliness, property, inheritance, repair, and use. Clothes are not discarded when fashion shifts or a seam weakens. They can be altered, mended, relined, handed down, sold, or transformed. Long before Lisa possesses a marriage chest of her own, she grows within a culture in which cloth quietly measures much of domestic life. Girls of families comparable to hers could learn sewing and textile skills, observe the management of household goods, receive religious instruction, and acquire the knowledge expected of a future wife. The exact extent of Lisa's education is not preserved well enough for us to place a particular book in her hands or give her a lesson on a particular day. So we leave the book closed and listen instead to the needle passing through cloth somewhere nearby. Thread draws tight, scissors close. A garment that has already belonged to someone continues its life. There is something gentle in the persistence of such objects. Human beings pass through childhood quickly, but a chest can remain in a room for decades. A blanket can cover an infant, then be folded away, then return in another winter. Wood gathers scratches. Linen thins. Iron darkens where hands repeatedly touch it. Time in Lisa's world is often visible because so little is disposable. Outside, Florence is measuring time differently. Bells are among the city's great invisible structures. Their sound crosses roofs and streets, entering houses without permission. Religious observance, work, public life, and the practical rhythm of daylight all help organize the day. Time is heard as much as it is read. A child does not need to understand a clock to know that the city has changed. The bells change. The street grows louder. Doors open. Hooves begin to strike stone. A cart passes. Voices gather around trade. Workshops wake into their own repeating sounds, wood being worked, metal struck, cloth handled, tools placed against benches. Florence is famous to us for what it will leave behind, but most of the people inside it are occupied with things history will never preserve individually. Bread, shoes, wood, cloth, oil, wine, repairs, accounts, water, the ordinary work of keeping another day intact. The streets themselves are neither the polished Renaissance stage imagined by later centuries, nor the permanent river of filth sometimes used to caricature the past. Florence has rules concerning cleanliness, drainage, refuse, and the management of public space. Those rules exist because mud, animals, waste, rainwater, craft activity, and dense human occupation are real problems. After rain, stone darkens. Water finds gutters and channels. Footwear meets wet paving. A hem can be lifted away from mud. In drier weather, dust replaces some of the dampness. Carts and animals leave their own traces. Market spaces gather the smells of produce: meat, fish, wine, leather, bodies, refuse, and food. Different trades give different streets their character, and it would be wrong to compress every Florentine odor into a single alley. The city changes from one turning to another, and from 1 hour to another. Near a bakery, warm bread alters the air. Near a working hearth, there is wood smoke and ash. Where leather and dyeing are practiced, sharper industrial smells belong to the labor of the city. Near the river, dampness enters the mixture. Inside churches, another world waits: wax, incense, cool stone, painted devotional images, voices, bells, and the shifting brightness of candles. Religion does not exist separately from daily life. It occupies objects and gestures as naturally as cooking occupies the kitchen. Small devotional images, crosses, prayer beads, blessed objects, candles, and images of the Virgin can inhabit domestic space. A hand closes around beads. Knees meet a floor. Fingers make the sign of the cross. For a girl growing toward adolescence, devotion is not merely a doctrine explained from a distance. It is physical, standing, kneeling, listening, touching, waiting. The year itself moves through feasts and fasts, Advent and Lent, ordinary Sundays and extraordinary processions. The calendar enters the kitchen because certain days alter what can be eaten. It enters the street because celebrations and religious observances alter crowds and sound. It enters the church through candles, music, images, sermons, and bodies gathering together. And it enters childhood through repetition. By the time Lisa is old enough to recognize the sequence of seasons, Florence has taught them without needing to name them. Winter makes rooms colder. The warmth of a brazier becomes more precious. Heavy wool and bedding matter more. Daylight leaves sooner. Rain complicates movement through the streets. Then spring changes the air and lengthens the usable day. Summer brings another discomfort. Shutters can manage glare, but closing the sun away also changes ventilation. Food requires attention in the heat. Flies belong to the season. Stone buildings offer shade, yet interiors can hold warmth. Clothing must negotiate the demands of climate and the demands of respectability at the same time. Autumn alters markets again. Food, weather, religious observance, agricultural connections beyond the walls. And the preparations of households follow rhythms older than anyone living inside them. The Gherardini family itself is tied not only to Florence, but to land beyond the city's dense streets. Their history contains rural property and older associations with the countryside. Even as Lisa's own childhood unfolds within the complicated social world of Florentine family life. This matters because Renaissance Florence is never entirely enclosed by its walls. Grain must arrive, wine must arrive, oil must arrive, wood must arrive, animals enter, produce enters. People move between rural estates and urban houses. A city may appear to be made of stone, but much of what sustains it grows elsewhere. At a household table, that wider landscape becomes ordinary food. Bread is fundamental. Legumes and vegetables belong to the practical diet. Cheese, eggs, oil, wine, fruit, meat, poultry, and fish enter diets according to means, season, religious restriction, and occasion. A comfortable merchant household should not be imagined eating a magnificent banquet each day, nor should it be reduced to a bowl of gruel. Daily life exists between those extremes. A pot simmers near a hearth, onions are cut, legumes soften in water. Bread is handled with the familiarity of something too common to require ceremony. A knife may serve both preparation and eating. Spoons are ordinary tools. Serving vessels can be ceramic, wooden, metal, or glazed according to function and wealth. Italian forks exist, though not as a universal utensil placed before every person in the modern manner. Wine is poured. Water is also part of life. The old story that people of this period avoid water entirely because it is always poisonous does not survive careful attention. Florence possesses wells and managed water resources, and water is required everywhere: drinking, cooking, washing, craft, laundry, and the endless maintenance of bodies and things. A basin waits. Water pours from an ewer. Hands are washed. A face can be cleaned with water and cloth. Hair is combed. Linen close to the body can be changed and washed. Here too the past becomes quieter when its clichés are removed. People in Lisa's world are neither modern in their hygiene nor indifferent to cleanliness. Clean linen itself is an important technology of bodily care. Soap, alkaline cleaning substances, basins, towels, combs, and laundering all belong to a culture that understands cleanliness in its own ways. Laundry has its own physical rhythm. Wet linen grows heavy in the hands. Ash-derived lye can help clean it. Cloth is soaked, handled, rinsed, wrung, and left to dry. Whether a mistress, servant, or hired laundress performs a particular stage depends on the household and circumstance. A woman of Lisa's social world can be deeply involved in the management of textiles without personally carrying out every exhausting task. That distinction matters. Her family belongs neither to the laboring poor nor to the highest circle of Florentine magnificence. The old Gherardini name carries prestige, yet Anton Maria's economic circumstances are constrained enough that Lisa's childhood should not be painted in uninterrupted luxury. Perhaps the most truthful visual language for her early years is moderation. Good cloth, carefully preserved. Furniture that matters because it is meant to last. Food without endless abundance. Servants where the household can support them, but not an army of attendants. old families standing beside practical financial limits, and a girl growing within all of it. We cannot hear Lisa's childhood voice. No diary waits for us. No private page tells us whether she disliked winter mornings, whether she feared storms, whether she enjoyed a particular feast, whether she watched the Arno with curiosity, or whether a certain church bell became familiar enough that she ceased to notice it. Those silences should remain silent. There is no need to fill them. A life does not become less human because we refuse to invent its secrets. Instead, the city keeps speaking around her. Florence in the 1480s is changing even while household routines repeat. Buildings rise and are altered. Clothing fashions shift. Painted images appear in churches and homes. Wealth moves through banking, trade, textiles, land, dowries, marriages, and inheritance. Political power gathers around names a child may hear long before she can understand what they mean. But from inside a house, history often arrives without announcing itself as history. It may come as a conversation among adults, a new tax, a marriage negotiation, a procession outside, a sermon discussed after church, the price of grain, a relative arriving, a bell ringing at an unusual hour. The public world enters the private one in fragments. Lisa grows taller. Infant linen disappears from her immediate world, and other cloth replaces it. Her hair is arranged according to age and custom. Garments change as childhood recedes. Linen lies against the skin. Wool provides much of the practical outer fabric of ordinary life, while more expensive textiles carry stronger signals of status and occasion. Clothes fasten, lace, layer, and restrict the body in ways different from ours. Shoes meet stone. Stairs are climbed. Doors open into rooms where adults are speaking about matters that concern a girl's future, even when she is not the person making the decisions. Marriage is one of those futures. For Florentine families, it is never merely a private romance between two individuals. It involves property, reputation, kinship, dowry, household formation, and the continuation of family networks. A daughter's textiles can therefore belong to a larger economic story. Sheets, clothing, stored cloth, chests, objects waiting for another house. The dowry system gives women material claims while also placing them inside a legal and familial structure very different from modern independence. It is too simple to describe Florentine wives as powerless, just as it would be too simple to imagine them freely controlling property in the modern sense. Their world is built from overlapping rights and obligations. Family matters. Marriage matters. Widowhood will matter. A chest can be both furniture and law made visible. By the early 1490s, Lisa is entering adolescence while Florence itself moves toward years of uncertainty. The city remains beautiful without knowing that later generations will call this period a golden age. Beauty here is mixed with ordinary inconvenience. Magnificent churches stand within streets where animals pass. Fine cloth exists beside patched linen. Wealthy palaces rise not far from modest interiors. Sacred images glow above altars, while household accounts record practical concerns. And beneath all of it, the bells continue. Their sound may be one of the few things capable of passing through nearly every level of the city at once. Across the roofs of wealthy families, across workshops, across markets, across rooms where children sleep, across kitchens where fires are being lit, across convent walls, across the Arno. Sound does not respect property. Perhaps this is why bells belong so naturally to the experience of time. They remind a city that another portion of the day has passed. By 1494, Lisa is about 15. The Florence around her is entering one of the great political disruptions of her youth. The Medici order that has shaped the city is collapsing. French forces under Charles VIII are entering Italy, and Florence is moving into a period in which political change and religious intensity will become increasingly difficult to separate from ordinary urban life. Yet even now, the household must continue. Bread still has to be acquired, water still has to be carried, clothes still tear, children still become ill, fires still die if no one tends them, accounts still need attention. The extraordinary sits on top of the ordinary without replacing it. This may be one of the strangest truths about living through history. People rarely wake knowing that the day around them will someday become a paragraph in a book. They wake because light has reached the shutters, because a child is crying, because bells are ringing, because work is waiting, because the room is cold, because someone has begun to make a fire, and Lisa's life is approaching one of those changes that will alter nearly every material detail around her. On the 5th of March, 1495, when she is 15 years old, Lisa Gherardini marries Francesco del Giocondo. He is older than she is, a Florentine merchant associated with the silk trade. Their marriage joins two families whose social histories are different but compatible. Lisa brings the respected Gherardini lineage, while Francesco belongs to a commercially established Florentine household. Her dowry is recorded at 500 florins, including property. The number is easy to say, 500. But numbers become more meaningful when we allow them to return to physical things. A dowry belongs to contracts and calculations, certainly, but also to the future security of a woman, to property, to textiles, to household arrangements, to the negotiations between families, and to the room she is about to enter as a wife. Marriage changes the geography of a woman's life. The familiar household of childhood no longer contains her in the same way. Another door becomes important. Another set of rooms, another family's objects, another domestic hierarchy, another bed, another key. We should be careful here, because it would be very easy to turn a documented marriage into an invented scene. We do not know what Lisa thought as she crossed from one stage of life into the next. We do not know whether she was frightened. We do not know whether she was hopeful. We do not know what private words passed between her and her mother, so we will not give them words. Instead, we can remain with what marriage physically means in the Florence around her. Cloth is folded. Goods change households. A marriage chest is opened. The chamber acquires a new importance. A bed, perhaps one of the most valuable pieces of furniture in the home, is not merely where two people sleep. In the years ahead, it may become a place of conception, childbirth recovery, illness, conversation, prayer, and eventually the quiet vulnerability of age. But Lisa is not old, she is 15. The years ahead are still invisible, for now. The city beyond the walls of the house is restless, and the rooms within it continue their ancient work of sheltering human beings from that restlessness. A fire burns close to the hearth. Somewhere in Florence, a craftsman closes his workshop. Someone empties a basin. Someone counts coins. A servant carries water. A mother settles an infant. A woman folds linen into a chest and turns the key. The daylight moves slowly away from one wall and leaves another in shadow. And in the new household of Francesco del Giocondo, Lisa's childhood has quietly given way to something else, not with the certainty of a portrait, not with the stillness by which the world will later remember her, but with the ordinary movement of a young woman entering a house in Florence while life continues on every side. The door closes behind the day's traffic. Inside, the rooms grow dimmer. There will be more mornings here, more fires to be lit, more bells crossing the rooftops, and soon, among the chests, linens, prayers, footsteps, and changing seasons of this house, another small life will begin to alter the rhythm of Lisa's own. The change begins almost invisibly, not with a great public ceremony, nor with the kind of moment later painters might choose to preserve, but with the rearrangement of ordinary things. A garment now belongs in a different chest. Linen is stored beneath a different roof. The voices beyond the chamber door belong to another household. The footsteps on the stairs have their own familiar rhythm, one that Lisa must gradually come to recognize. Marriage has placed her inside the commercial world of the Del Giocondo family, but commerce does not remain somewhere outside the home. It enters through bolts of cloth and household accounts, through property and payments, through servants and supplies, through the movement of goods along streets whose workshops make Florence one of the great manufacturing cities of its age. Francesco is associated with the silk trade. Silk belongs to the more luxurious end of Florentine material life, but the world around it depends upon much less glamorous labor: measuring, carrying, storing, recording, negotiating, stitching, dyeing, repairing. Fine fabric may eventually appear in a splendid garment, yet before that moment it has passed through many hands. For Lisa, however, the first years of marriage are not preserved as a sequence of private scenes. The documents give us dates where memory gives us silence. In May of 1496, a little more than a year after the marriage, a son is born. His name is Piero. Once again, the safest way to approach such a moment is not to pretend that we can enter Lisa's mind. We cannot know what she whispered, what she feared, whether the birth came by daylight or darkness, or which familiar face she looked toward when the pain became difficult. But we know much more about the physical world of childbirth in Renaissance Florence. And so the chamber around a woman like Lisa slowly changes. The bed becomes the center of the room. Linen becomes especially important. Water must be available. Warmth matters. Female attendants gather around the laboring woman, with midwives occupying a central place in ordinary childbirth. The male-dominated hospital scene familiar to later centuries does not belong here. For an uncomplicated birth, this is overwhelmingly a domestic and female space. The same bed that ordinarily receives sleep becomes something else for a while. Curtains can make the chamber more enclosed. A fire or brazier may offer warmth according to season and means. Cloth is prepared. Hands work. Voices remain close. Then there is an infant where there was none before. A cradle may be waiting nearby. Swaddling cloth surrounds the small body. The household has gained another rhythm, one indifferent to bells and commercial schedules. Children wake when they wake. They cry when they are hungry. Their linen must be changed. Someone must carry them, feed them, watch them, settle them. Among urban Italian families, wet nursing is common enough to belong to the world around Lisa, though we should not assign a particular arrangement to Piero without evidence. Motherhood and direct physical childcare are not always identical. Female relatives, servants, midwives, and wet nurses can all participate in the early life of a child. What remains certain is that birth changes a household. A new body requires space. A new name enters family memory, and the woman who was herself a child only a few years earlier now occupies another position within the casa. After childbirth, the chamber may remain a place of recovery. Renaissance Florence possesses a remarkable material culture surrounding this period. In the 15th century, painted birth trays, known as deschi da parto, could be used to carry restorative food to a woman after delivery. As the 16th century advances, decorated maiolica vessels increasingly become part of this world. These objects are beautiful when they survive in museums. But here, before the glass case, their beauty is practical. A bowl contains food. A tray must be carried. Someone walks carefully so that broth does not spill. Painted wood passes through a doorway. The recovering woman remains in bed. Outside, the city continues. The contrast is quiet but immense. Within one room, a body is recovering from birth. Beyond the shutters, carts pass and merchants bargain. Church bells sound over roofs. The political transformation of Florence continues. Girolamo Savonarola has become one of the most powerful religious voices in the city, preaching a severe vision of moral reform at a time when Florence is trying to understand what kind of republic it has become after the departure of the Medici. His presence belongs to the public atmosphere of Lisa's young adulthood. But we must resist the temptation to place Lisa beneath a particular pulpit or invent her response to a particular sermon. We do not know. What we can say is that the city in which she raises her first child is increasingly saturated with religious debate. Sermons, processions, public morality, clothing luxury, civic identity, repentance, and political authority are being discussed with an intensity that reaches far beyond churches. Yet even religious fervor must pass through the texture of ordinary days. A rosary remains a string of objects beneath the fingers. A candle still consumes wax. A church remains cool beneath the feet. Incense still disperses into air already marked by the smell of bodies, cloth, stone, and flame. A sermon ends. People go home. A pot must still be placed over the fire. The extraordinary always returns to the ordinary. And for Lisa, these years continue to bring the physical work and vulnerability of family life. Not every child born into a Renaissance household survives. Lisa and Francesco's family grows, but it also knows the uncertainty that surrounds childhood in an age when illness can move quickly through a home. The evidence from Renaissance families does not support the old idea that parents simply remained emotionally distant because infant and child mortality were common. Familiarity with death does not make loss meaningless. It only makes death more present. Baptism therefore carries urgency as well as celebration. A newborn enters the Christian community quickly. In the period after childbirth, the mother may still be recovering at home while the infant is taken for baptism by others. Kinship expands through godparents. Religious identity begins before the child can possibly understand the gestures being performed around it. Back in the house, the mother remains among linen, bedding, food, attendants, and the gradual return of ordinary movement. Days accumulate. Piero grows. Other pregnancies and children follow during Lisa's married life, and the household becomes increasingly populated by the overlapping stages of family existence, infants requiring constant attention, older children capable of movement and errands, adults managing property and work, servants carrying out tasks, relatives arriving and departing. A house with children sounds different. The quiet is interrupted more often. Small feet move over floors. A cradle creaks. A child cries from another room. An adult voice corrects someone. A game produces a brief burst of noise. Then, just as quickly, attention shifts elsewhere. Children in this world do not inhabit a separate universe designed exclusively for them. Their lives unfold inside adult spaces. They observe work. They are given chores as they grow. Their education depends on sex, family resources, future expectations, and circumstance. Boys may move toward schooling, commerce, or apprenticeship. Girls may acquire the religious, textile, domestic, and social knowledge expected within marriage or convent life. None of this means childhood contains no play. Balls, simple dolls, whistles, and other small objects appear within the broader material culture of children. But play exists beside preparation. The household is already teaching the future, and while children grow, their mother changes with them. Lisa enters her 20s. This is important, because the face by which later centuries will know her can easily trap her at one age. Once a famous image becomes attached to a human being, time seems to stop around that person. But Lisa does not stop. Her hands age. Her clothing changes. The household changes. Children become heavier to carry, then too old to be carried at all. Objects acquire wear. A table's surface becomes smoother where hands repeatedly touch it. A chest gathers marks near its iron fittings. Linen is repaired. A garment that once seemed new becomes ordinary and eventually old. Even Florence changes around familiar objects. By the end of the 1490s, the city has passed through the rise and fall of Savonarola. In 1498, after the political and religious movement around him collapses, he is executed in the Piazza della Signoria. It is one of the dramatic events of the period. But we will not linger in the spectacle. From the perspective of an ordinary household, the city must absorb even this. Crowds disperse. Ash cools. Doors reopen. Markets resume. Bells continue measuring days that no longer contain the man whose voice had filled so much of Florence. Time has a strange indifference to prominence. It does not stop for rulers. It does not stop for preachers. And it does not stop for painters. As the new century begins, Lisa is entering her early 20s. Somewhere in the household, morning light continues to find the same practical objects. A servant or household worker may uncover embers. A water vessel is lifted. Bread is prepared or acquired. A chest opens. Clothing emerges from darkness. Dressing a respectable married woman is itself a sequence of material adjustments. Linen lies closest to the body. Stockings cover the legs. A gown such as the Gamurra shapes the outer figure. Sleeves may be separately fastened. Shoes are leather. A belt or girdle can complete the arrangement, while hair is combed, braided, pinned, covered, or arranged according to age, status, fashion, and occasion. Portraits can mislead us here. The surviving painted women of Renaissance Florence often appear wrapped in fabrics chosen precisely because they communicate wealth, marriage, virtue, or family prestige. The ordinary day cannot be reconstructed simply by copying the richest portrait. Silk is costly. Velvet is costly. Metal thread textiles are costly. Wool and linen remain the foundations of much ordinary clothing, and clothing has a bodily reality that paintings conceal. Fabric has weight. Fastenings pull. Stockings wrinkle. Leather shoes meet uneven paving. A wool garment that feels protective in cold weather can become burdensome in summer. A veil moves slightly with air. Dust gathers along lower hems. Rain darkens cloth. Clothing absorbs the smoke of hearths and lamps, the smell of streets, kitchens, bodies, and rooms. Florence is worn on the body, and the body, in turn, moves through Florence according to social expectations. Respectable women are not permanently imprisoned within their houses. churches, kinship, religious observance, family business, ceremonies, and other legitimate purposes create movement through the city. But public visibility is shaped by status, age, reputation, accompaniment, and custom. A young married woman does not occupy the street in precisely the same way as a male merchant, nor will an older widow inhabit it exactly as a bride does. The city changes according to who is walking through it. And now, sometime around 1503, one particular movement in Lisa's life brings us closer to the image that will eventually make her famous. The evidence traditionally connecting Lisa Gherardini with Leonardo, Vinci's portrait places the beginning of the work around this period. The identification rests not merely on later legend, but on documentary evidence, including the contemporary note made by Agostino Vespucci in 1503, referring to Leonardo working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. This is the moment at which it becomes very easy to lose Lisa, because Leonardo enters the room, and history has taught us to look toward him. He is already a figure whose notebooks, paintings, designs, observations, and restless intelligence will generate centuries of attention. If we allow him to occupy the center now, the young woman before us will become what she has so often become, the subject of someone else's genius. So we will keep our attention where it has been, on Lisa. She is about 24 years old. She has been married for approximately 8 years. She is not the ageless woman of the Louvre. She is a Florentine wife and mother whose life began long before Leonardo's brush approached a panel and will continue for decades after his work on it. The circumstances of the commission remain less certain than the identification itself. A portrait might belong to the social world of marriage, family status, household prosperity, or commemoration, but we should not force a single motive where the evidence does not give us one. Nor can we reconstruct the sittings as though someone recorded them. We do not know the precise room. We do not know the exact number of sessions. We do not know what Lisa and Leonardo said to one another. We do not know whether they spoke much at all. We should not hear assistants grinding a particular pigment on a particular morning simply because such work occurred in Renaissance workshops. And yet, even with all these doors kept properly closed, there is still enough to imagine responsibly. There is a woman required to remain relatively still. There is clothing. There is light. There is a painter looking. There is time. Portraiture is strange in this respect. Ordinary life depends upon motion. A mother moves through rooms. Hands open chests. Feet climb stairs. Clothing is adjusted. Food is served. Children require attention. Doors open and close. But a portrait asks the body to pause. Perhaps this is where the famous stillness begins, not as a mystery, but as the basic condition of being painted. Leonardo observes a face that no one yet considers famous. The forehead, the eyes, the line of the nose, the mouth, hands resting one over the other. The dark clothing seen in the finished image does not need to become evidence of grief or secret symbolism. Renaissance dress is governed by status, fashion, textile value, modesty, and convention in ways that do not map neatly onto modern color assumptions. And the veil visible around her hair should not be made into a simple clue for mourning. A painting can invite stories faster than evidence can restrain them. For centuries, that will happen to Lisa. Her expression will be examined. Her health will be diagnosed from paint. Her marriage will be imagined. Her happiness will be guessed. Her teeth, pregnancies, personality, desires, and supposed secrets will all be reconstructed by people who never met her. But here, in 1503, none of that exists. There is only the slow accumulation of pigment. Leonardo's method does not create a face with one decisive gesture. Layers matter. Transitions matter. The boundaries between light and shadow soften, and while the image develops slowly, Lisa's real body cannot remain within it. She leaves the painter's presence and returns to life. This is perhaps the most important movement in the entire story. Away from the portrait, back into the house, the woman returns to rooms where no one remains still for long. A child needs something. Food is being prepared. Someone is speaking near the doorway. Cloth waits to be put away. An account requires attention. Water has been carried upstairs. Smoke from the hearth has settled faintly into fabric. The portrait can wait. Life cannot. And this may help us understand why the painting and the woman eventually travel such different paths. The panel will remain with Leonardo rather than passing straightforwardly into the Del Giocondo household. He will continue working on it over a long period, carrying it through later stages of his own life. Lisa does not follow it. Her days remain in Florence. That separation matters, because from this point onward, there are effectively two journeys. One belongs to the painted Lisa. The other belongs to Lisa Gherardini. The painted woman will gradually become suspended outside ordinary time. She will never age beyond the face Leonardo gives her. Her hands will never wrinkle further. Her children will never interrupt her. No rain will touch her clothing. No smoke will settle into it. She will never climb another stair or feel winter's stone beneath her feet. The real Lisa does all the things a living body must do simply by continuing to exist. She grows older. Her household continues to expand and change. Florence moves through another season, then another. The portrait somewhere else remains young. Perhaps no object could demonstrate the difference between art and human life more quietly than that. A painting preserves. A life continues. By the middle years of the first decade of the 16th century, the material world around Lisa contains evidence of a woman no longer entering marriage for the first time. She has crossed into mature household life. Children and family arrangements occupy increasing space. The authority available to a merchant's wife can grow with experience, though always within the legal and social structures of Florentine marriage. Household management is not an abstract title. It is visible in keys, in stored grain, in oil jars, in textiles, in servants, in children's clothing, in furniture. In the difference between what can be used now and what must be preserved. A key is a small object, cold and hard in the hand, yet it can signify trust, responsibility, access, and control. Behind a locked chest may be cloth worth considerable money. Behind another door may be stored food. A household's stability depends on knowing what is present, what has been consumed, what must be replaced, what is owed, and what can be spared. Women of comparable Florentine households could participate significantly in this domestic economy, especially as they matured and, later, in widowhood. So the young bride gradually becomes someone else. Not suddenly. There is no morning on which experience announces itself complete. Authority gathers through repetition. A servant asks a question. A child needs clothing. A textile must be repaired. A relative visits. Food stores change with the season. Illness enters and leaves. A religious feast alters the household rhythm. Another pregnancy may transform the chamber. Another infant changes the sounds of night, and every change is absorbed into rooms that remain outwardly familiar. The bed is still there. The chest is still there. The table remains, but the people around them are older. This is how time usually moves when no one is painting it. Quietly, without a frame. In summer, the household negotiates heat. Shutters regulate sunlight. Food is watched more carefully. Air can become heavy inside enclosed rooms. Insects become more noticeable. In winter, the same spaces contract toward warmth. A brazier draws bodies nearer. Blankets gain importance. The bed curtains are not merely decorative. Rain alters the sound above roof tiles and the movement below in the street. Water passes through gutters. Wet shoes enter the house. Dampness lingers. Then sunlight returns. Laundry dries more easily. A market changes its produce. The religious calendar turns. Children grow. One can imagine a household year not as 12 named months but as a sequence of materials. Wool, ash, fresh greens, dust, fruit, rain, wax, linen, smoke, again and again, and around these materials, Florence continues to transform politically. The Republic survives through unstable years. Alliances shift. Wars elsewhere in Italy affect the city. The Medici remain absent for now. Public life is filled with concerns far larger than one household. Yet Lisa's historical importance does not depend on whether she participated directly in those events. Her life offers something quieter. It allows us to watch the Renaissance from inside the rooms that great political histories often leave behind. A Renaissance made not only by artists and statesmen, but by people preserving linens, by women recovering from childbirth, by servants carrying water, by children learning prayers, by widows keeping accounts, by cooks watching a pot, by someone sweeping ash away from a hearth, by hands repairing what cannot simply be replaced. The famous age is also this. Perhaps especially this, because monuments survive precisely because most other things do not. The bread is eaten. The fire becomes ash. Water disappears into cloth. Children's voices vanish from rooms. Garments decay. Wood is burned or broken. Ordinary bodies return to the earth. And then, centuries later, we look at what remains and mistake survival for importance. Leonardo's panel survives. The sound of Lisa's household does not. Yet for Lisa, the sound was life, and the panel was only one small episode within it. By the end of these years, she is moving farther from the age preserved in paint. A child crosses a room. A door opens. Somewhere below, an object is set onto a wooden surface. Outside, Florence continues beneath changing light, and the face that history will hold forever in its 20s is already being left behind by the woman herself. As another decade gathers quietly around the house and the responsibilities within it begin, little by little, to belong to a more experienced pair of hands, experience settles into a household in ways that are difficult to see from outside. At first, responsibility may arrive as individual tasks, something to store, someone to instruct, a child to watch, a servant to answer, a garment to preserve. But after enough years, the separate acts begin to form a kind of memory of their own. A woman learns which chest holds the finer linen, which room remains cold longest after winter rain, how quickly oil disappears from storage when a household grows larger, which objects require repair before they become useless, and which routines can be trusted to continue without her constant attention. By the second decade of the 16th century, Lisa is no longer the 15-year-old bride who entered Francesco del Giocondo's household. She is in her 30s. The painted face associated with her remains somewhere beyond her daily life, unchanged. But here, inside Florence, change has become ordinary. Children have grown through infancy into other stages. Piero is no longer the small child whose arrival first altered the rhythms of the household. Camilla, Andrea, Giocondo, and Marietta belong to the family history that forms around Lisa and Francesco. Though not every young life follows the same path or survives equally long, the presence of children changes the shape of time. An infant measures it in feeding and sleep. An older child begins to measure it through instruction, prayer, errands, responsibilities, and the growing expectations of adulthood. Then, almost without notice, childhood becomes preparation for departure. A boy may move toward commerce or another occupation. A daughter may move toward marriage. Another may move toward religious life. The household that once seemed to expand begins, slowly, to release the people it has raised. But before those departures become visible, there are years of ordinary movement. A morning begins. Perhaps a shutter opens first in an upper room. The sound is wooden and brief. Then another. Light reaches the plaster unevenly. Dust that was invisible in darkness becomes visible for a moment as it drifts through the brighter air. Somewhere below, the hearth is being brought back to life. Ash is disturbed. A few surviving embers answer fresh fuel. The smell of smoke reaches clothing before the room has fully warmed. A pot is positioned. Water is poured. The house has crossed once more from night into usefulness. This transition happens thousands of times across Lisa's life. That is the strange generosity of ordinary routine. It repeats enough to become invisible, yet it is what life is mostly made from. A servant might carry water. Someone else might prepare bread or food. A garment requires attention. An account must be checked. A child has outgrown clothing that once seemed generous. A piece of linen has thinned where it has been washed again and again. The life of a household is partly the life of things wearing out. And women in merchant households could stand near the center of that material world, not necessarily by performing every task themselves, but by knowing what existed, what was needed, what was damaged, what could be repaired, and what must be purchased. Textiles are particularly important. They are useful, expensive, portable, inheritable. A household's cloth is never merely background. Sheets lie against bodies during sleep and illness. Linen wraps infants. Table linen marks meals and status. Garments communicate age, marriage, mourning, and prosperity. Curtains change the warmth and privacy of a bed. Cloth can become dowry property, family memory, practical necessity, or financial reserve. When a seam weakens, someone notices. A needle passes through it. Thread pulls two edges together. The repair may be almost invisible. Time continues inside the cloth. There is a patience to this that resembles the slow life of the city itself. Florence is changing politically, yet so much of its physical rhythm remains recognizable. The bells still move across the rooftops. The Arno still divides and connects. Churches continue to gather people through feast days, funerals, sermons, masses, and private devotion. Markets still depend upon the arrival of food from beyond the walls. Craftsmen still open workshops. Rain still exposes every weakness in drainage and paving. Summer still presses warmth into stone. Winter still reminds households how little of a room a single fire can truly heat. And yet power changes. In 1512, the Medici returned to Florence. For political history, this is a major turn. For Lisa, we cannot say what she thought of it. The documents do not preserve a private verdict. So the city will change around her without being forced into her mind. Perhaps public offices alter. Perhaps conversations among men in commercial and civic networks carry different caution. Perhaps sermons, ceremonies, and public symbols reflect the new political order. But within a household, another rhythm continues beneath all of it. A table is set, children are corrected, someone becomes ill, a religious fast changes the meal, a candle is replaced, a chest is locked, a woman grows older. The great events of Florence never entirely silence the domestic world. They enter it through prices, law, taxation, insecurity, opportunity, rumor, ceremony, and family decisions. But they must pass through kitchens and chambers before they can become part of ordinary life. That may be why political time and household time often feel so different. Governments can change in a year. A child takes years to grow. A building may receive a new emblem in an afternoon. A piece of household linen may remain useful across decades. There are many clocks in human life, even when only some of them have hands. In Lisa's world, bells remain one of the most powerful. Their sound marks religious and civic time, but it also changes character according to distance and weather. On a dry morning, a bell can travel sharply. In rain, the city seems to absorb sound differently. Inside a thick, walled room, the first strike may arrive softened, followed by another, then another from somewhere farther away. No single bell owns the city. They overlap. And beneath them, quieter sounds continue. A spoon against ceramic, a broom against a floor, leather shoes on stairs, a child reciting words, the scrape of a chair, the brief metallic sound of a key. A house is an instrument played by many hands, and by now Lisa has spent years listening to one. Her children are growing into lives of their own. Camilla's path carries her towards Sant'Orsola, where she takes the religious name Sister Beatrice. A convent is easy for the modern imagination to reduce to a closed world of bare stone and silence. The historical reality is more complex. Florentine convents are religious communities, but they are also connected to family strategies, education, property, dowry pressures, devotional life, and social networks. Women entering them do not simply disappear from family existence. Visitors can come. Food and objects can pass between relatives and religious houses. Convent parlors allow controlled contact. Grilles and institutional boundaries regulate interaction without erasing kinship. For a mother whose daughter enters such a community, the relationship changes form. We should not invent Lisa's private grief or relief. We do not know what she felt, but we can understand the material distance. A daughter who once slept beneath the same roof now hears another set of bells. Her clothing changes. Her daily rhythm changes. Meals, prayer, work, silence, visitors, and religious obligation are reorganized around the institution. The family's geography expands again. One part of Lisa's life is now connected to the streets leading towards Sant'Orsola, and whenever a family member enters a religious community, the meaning of household objects shifts subtly. A garment no longer needed here may become irrelevant there. Food can become a gift. A devotional object becomes a shared language. Conversation may occur across a barrier rather than around a domestic table. A mother and daughter can remain part of one another's lives without occupying the same room. The city contains both of them, one under the roof of a merchant household, one within convent walls. Between them lie streets, bells, doorways, and the ordinary distance of Florence. The world beyond those streets continues to change. Leonardo has left the city again. The portrait associated with Lisa is no longer simply a Florentine household object waiting to be delivered. Whatever the precise reason, it remains with him, This separation grows more remarkable with time. The real Lisa is increasingly connected to children, marriage, household goods, religious institutions, and the political instability of Florence. The painted Lisa becomes increasingly connected to Leonardo's own movements. One life grows more local, the other becomes portable. Wood can travel in a way a household cannot. A painted panel can be wrapped, carried, transported, protected. It has no children to consider, no property arrangements, no servants, no sick family members, no need to remain near a church, market, spouse, or daughter. Human beings accumulate obligations. Objects can sometimes escape them, and so the portrait moves while Lisa remains. Years pass. The woman in Florence enters her 40s. Age does not arrive all at once. There is no precise morning when a person becomes old enough to be recognized differently by the household. Instead, others become younger in comparison. Children become adults. Young servants appear. A daughter's marriage or religious vocation makes one generation suddenly visible behind another. The body itself changes more quietly. Modern medicine would tempt us to diagnose every discomfort. But the evidence does not permit us to assign Lisa particular ailments. We can only remember the ordinary physical realities of aging before modern dentistry, modern optical correction, antibiotics, central heating, elevators, and countless small conveniences. Stairs demand effort. Winter cold finds joints and hands. Teeth carry years of use. Eyes adapt to dim rooms with whatever ability age allows. Needlework, reading, accounting, and fine domestic tasks depend upon light that is already limited. A candle that was merely weak to a younger eye can become more significant later. The difference between midday and evening grows practical. The body experiences architecture differently as it ages. A stair that once meant nothing becomes steeper. A low stool becomes less comfortable. A cold room becomes less easily ignored. A heavy wool garment can feel both protective and burdensome. Age changes a house without moving a single wall. It changes because the body passing through it has changed. This is one reason old objects matter so much in Lisa's story. A chest she might have encountered as a young wife could, in principle, remain when she is middle-aged. A table can outlast the childhood of several children. A devotional image can watch over births, illness, meals, arguments, departures, and mourning without itself appearing to change very much. The people around it do. Perhaps this is another way in which objects resemble portraits. They make human change more visible by resisting it. But even objects age. Wood dries, paint fades, iron corrodes, cloth weakens. Nothing escapes time entirely. Some things merely move through it more slowly. By the 1520s, Lisa has lived long enough to remember more than one Florence. The city of her childhood beneath Lorenzo, Medici, is gone. The Florence of Savonarola is gone. The republic that followed has been replaced and challenged. The Medici have returned, and the Italy around Florence remains unsettled by larger conflicts in which French, Imperial, papal, and regional powers struggle for advantage. Again, these events belong to Lisa's environment without giving us access to her opinions. She does not need to become a political commentator for history to reach her. Political instability can enter the merchant household through commerce, through taxes, through disrupted roads, through food prices, through fear of disease accompanying movement and war, through the absence or arrival of people, through prayers said publicly for the city, through news spoken over a table, and through the question every household understands sooner or later: how much do we have? Stored grain becomes more meaningful when supplies are uncertain. Oil becomes more carefully measured. Salted food has another value when markets become less reliable. Keys become more important. The practical intelligence of domestic management becomes a form of resilience. Not heroic in the way chronicles prefer. Quiet, measured, almost invisible. In 1527, the wider Italian world is shaken by the sack of Rome. Florence again expels the Medici and restores a republic. Lisa is approaching 50. She has now lived through repeated transformations of the same city. We cannot say whether she welcomes this change, but the instability will not remain abstract for long, because soon Florence itself will be placed under pressure in a way that changes the ordinary material life of nearly everyone within its walls. Before that pressure closes around the city, there is still daily life, and perhaps it is important to stay with it for a while. A market on an ordinary morning, produce arranged according to season, bread, vegetables, fruit when available, fish, meat, cheese, ceramics, small household goods, scales and weights, coins, voices, animals close enough to add their smells to everything else. Markets are not tidy modern displays. Food waste falls. Mud or dust collects according to weather. People handle goods. Sellers call out. Buyers assess quality. A woman of a merchant household does not necessarily perform every purchase herself. Servants can be sent. Household organization varies, but the market remains connected to her life whether she walks through it or not. What enters the kitchen began somewhere else. A basket arrives. Leafy vegetables carry traces of soil. Onions are stored where they will remain dry. Grain must be protected from damp and pests. Oil rests in ceramic vessels. Wine occupies barrels or flasks. Food is therefore also architecture. It requires spaces, shelves, cellars, coolness, dryness, access. A household is designed partly around protecting what sustains it. The same is true of water. The lifting of water through a house is easy to overlook until one remembers its weight. Every basinful has been carried. Every pot of water has moved through human effort. Laundry multiplies that effort. So does childbirth. So does illness. So does summer heat. A household with servants may distribute this labor, but the labor does not disappear. Someone climbs the stairs holding the vessel. The handle presses into the hand. Water shifts with each step. A little spills. The stone or wood beneath the feet becomes briefly darker. Then the vessel reaches its destination, and the effort vanishes into usefulness. History rarely records the carrying. Only the result remains. Perhaps that is why ordinary labor can feel so peaceful from a distance and so demanding from within. A lamp seems simple until someone must fill it. A clean sheet seems simple until someone washes it. Bread seems simple until grain, flour, kneading, fuel, baking, transport, and money are placed behind it. A warm room seems simple until wood has been cut, carried, purchased, stored, lit, and tended. Civilization hides labor by turning it into routine. Lisa's household belongs to that same quiet system. Her position as a mature wife is not merely social. It is logistical. Children must move toward futures. Goods must be managed. Relationships must be maintained. Religious obligations shape the calendar. The household must remain functioning even as Florence grows less certain outside. In 1529, uncertainty hardens into siege. Imperial and papal forces surround Florence in an effort to restore Medici rule. Lisa is about 50 years old. The city that has already changed around her many times now becomes a fortified place under pressure. And here, more than anywhere, we must avoid inventing personal scenes for which we have no evidence. We do not know where Lisa stood when distant cannon were heard. We do not know whether she saw troops from a window. We do not know what she said to her children. We do not know whether she experienced panic, resignation, anger, prayerful confidence, or some mixture impossible to recover. But we do know what siege does to urban life. Food becomes uncertain. Prices rise. Grain becomes precious. Disease spreads. Movement becomes constrained. The surrounding countryside suffers. The fortified city must feed itself while cut away from normal patterns of supply. A household that once measured grain as a routine resource begins to measure it differently. A scoop from a storage vessel now has another meaning. A heel of bread lasts another moment. Oil is poured with more attention. The difference between appetite and necessity becomes narrower. Hunger is not dramatic every hour. Sometimes it is simply repetitive. The body waits. The next meal is smaller, then another, and another. The kitchen itself grows quieter because there is less to prepare. A pot can hold more water than substance. Food that would once have seemed ordinary becomes valuable. The smells of abundance fade first. Roasting meat becomes less common. Fresh produce becomes less reliable. Stored foods matter more. The city hears other sounds too. The siege places violence beyond and around the walls, but within Florence the experience remains uneven. Some districts hear more. Some feel danger differently. Cannon belong to this moment, but they should not become the soundtrack of every hour. Even under siege, bells ring. People pray. Children speak. Someone becomes sick for reasons unrelated to war. A household still cleans what it can. A garment still tears. Someone still carries water. This is the unsettling calm of prolonged crisis. Life adapts. until adaptation itself begins to feel normal. The city suffers famine, disease, and exhaustion through the long months of 1529 and 1530, and Lisa, somewhere within that urban world, belongs not to the eternally young face of the portrait, but to this older body moving through scarcity. The contrast is almost impossible to ignore. Somewhere far from the besieged household, the painted woman remains smooth-skinned. Her table is never short of food because she does not eat. Her lips never dry. Her hands never tremble from fatigue. Her body cannot fall ill. She exists in the perfect economy of an image. The real woman requires bread, warmth, water, sleep, and safety. There is nothing mysterious about those needs. They are precisely what make her human. The siege eventually ends. In 1530, Florence falls. Medici power returns under a new and increasingly hereditary form. The republic that has risen and fallen around Lisa's adult life is effectively finished. But once again, political conclusion does not mean the conclusion of human life. Doors open. Markets must be restored. Trade reorganizes itself. Families count what remains. People return to properties where they can. The dead are remembered. The living continue. Florence emerges changed. Lisa is in her early 50s now. The city of her childhood exists mostly in memory. Even the faces around the household have altered. Children who once required swaddling are adults. Some have their own obligations. Some have left the immediate house. One daughter belongs to convent life. The structure around Lisa has turned itself inside out. Once, adults surrounded her. Now she is one of the older adults whom others have grown up around. This is how a generation becomes visible, not through ceremony, through comparison. A younger hand takes a vessel. A younger body climbs the stairs more quickly. A daughter or daughter-in-law occupies spaces once associated with a bride. New children may bring the sounds of another generation into the family network. Time begins to repeat itself without ever truly repeating. Another cradle may appear, another piece of infant linen, another baptism. But Lisa is no longer the young mother in the bed. She stands elsewhere in the structure now. Older, experienced, closer to the role once occupied by women who surrounded her own births. The same actions return from another perspective, and perhaps this is the gentlest form of historical repetition. The cradle is familiar. The person beside it has changed. Outside evening approaches. The city settles after another day beneath Medici rule. Light leaves upper walls first, then withdraws from lower rooms. A worker closes a shop. A market stall is cleared. An animal is led away. Doors become more important as streets darken. Oil lamps and candles create small points of interior life behind shutters. There is no broad glow spilling from every window. Light remains precious and close. Inside the Del Giocondo household, familiar objects wait in deepening shadow. A cassone, a table, a chair, ceramic vessels, a devotional image, keys, textiles. The objects are ordinary enough that no one thinks of preserving the moment. And perhaps that is why it feels so near. Nothing has been arranged for us. No one knows we are watching. Lisa is simply continuing through another year of her life. Long after the painter has disappeared from her daily world, and long before the city will begin to forget the living woman in favor of the painted one, the room cools. Somewhere, a flame is protected from a draft. The household grows quieter, and beyond these familiar walls, another change is already approaching, not from armies this time, but from age, family, and the slow narrowing of the years that remain to Francesco and Lisa together. The years do not narrow all at once. They gather first in small adjustments. A room that once seemed familiar at every hour begins to change more noticeably with the light. A stair requires a little more care. Winter settles more deeply into the body. The household still follows its rhythms, but the person moving through those rhythms is no longer the same woman who once entered them for the first time. By the 1530s, Lisa is moving through the later part of her life. Florence, too, has entered another age. The republic that shaped so much of her adulthood has fallen. Medici power has returned in a more permanent form. The political city has changed names, offices, loyalties, and expectations, while the physical city continues to hold many of the same streets, churches, houses, bells, and walls. There is comfort in that continuity, and perhaps some strangeness too. A woman can spend decades passing the same corner and find that the government beyond it has changed several times. The paving remains underfoot. A church door still opens inward. The Arno still moves beneath its bridges. Rain still darkens plaster. Yet the invisible order surrounding those things is different. Human beings are always living inside two cities at once. One is made of stone. The other is made of agreements. Stone often lasts longer. Within Lisa's household world, time is visible in another way. The objects that once belonged to the beginning of married life have become older too. Textiles have been repaired, replaced, passed onward, or worn through. Furniture may have gathered years of use. Household goods circulate between generations through inheritance, marriage, gift, sale, and practical necessity. A daughter once prepared for adulthood, then another. A son became a man. Children no longer occupy the same position in relation to their mother. They have crossed the invisible threshold that every family eventually reaches, when the people once instructed begin carrying responsibilities of their own. This is one of the quiet transformations of age. A mother does not stop being a mother because her children are grown, but motherhood changes direction. The hand that once fastened a child's clothing may later receive help from that child. The person who once arranged a baptism may someday have prayers arranged on her behalf. Nothing in life stands still long enough to preserve the roles we think define us. Lisa's daughter Camilla has already moved into religious life at Sant'Orsola under the name Sister Beatrice. Other children have taken their own paths. The household that once expanded around pregnancies and infancy is becoming less centered on birth and more centered on continuity. There may be younger generations elsewhere in the family network, but Lisa herself now belongs to the older layer of that structure. And old age in Renaissance Florence is not simply withdrawal. Older women can possess considerable household authority. Widows in particular may manage servants, movable goods, accounts, food stores, family negotiations, and relationships between generations, depending upon wealth and legal circumstances. Married women, too, accumulate knowledge that younger household members do not yet possess. Experience has practical value. Who repaired this before? Which creditor can wait? Which fabric is worth preserving? Which household servant can be trusted? Which relative will understand a particular request? Which church receives a certain family devotion? Which chest contains the document everyone suddenly needs? Memory becomes a kind of furniture. It occupies the house, even though no inventory can record it. And Lisa has had more than 50 years to collect it. She has seen Florence beneath the Medici, without the Medici, under Savonarola, under a republic, again under the Medici, again under a republic, and finally under a new ducal order. She has lived through births, deaths, marriages, religious vocations, shortages, political upheaval, and the ordinary accumulation of seasons. Her famous portrait preserves none of this. It holds only a young face. The contradiction grows larger every year. Somewhere beyond Florence, the painted woman remains still. In Lisa's own rooms, aging continues to rearrange the body. We should be cautious here. There is no need to invent sickness simply because a person is growing older. A woman in her 50s or 60s may suffer poor eyesight, dental wear, aching joints, fatigue, or other common discomforts. But we do not know which belonged specifically to Lisa. So we let aging appear through environment rather than diagnosis. A stair is there. A candle is dim. A winter room is cold. A heavy garment has weight. A chair is useful. A bed is warmest once the curtains are drawn. The body encounters each of these things differently at 60 than it did at 16. Even sound can change with age, though again we cannot assign hearing loss where none is documented. What matters is not illness. What matters is time embodied. The household continues to wake. Shutters open. The hearth is tended. Water is moved. Food is prepared. Clothing is arranged. The same actions occur, but Lisa's position in relation to them is changing. She may supervise more and perform less. Younger household members may move more quickly through tasks once familiar to her. A servant carries a vessel. Someone else climbs the stairs. A younger woman handles a child. Lisa's value does not diminish because the labor shifts. It changes form. Knowledge accumulates while physical effort may gradually move elsewhere. This is true in many human communities. Age turns participation into direction, direction into memory, memory into presence, and presence eventually into absence. But not yet. Francesco is still alive. Their marriage has lasted more than 40 years. That alone changes the meaning of the household. A marriage beginning at 15 can become almost indistinguishable from the structure of adult life itself. Rooms are remembered with both people inside them. Years of shared property, children, obligations, illness, commerce, religion, loss, and routine accumulate around the couple. We know too little to describe the private emotional character of their marriage. We cannot say whether it was affectionate in the way modern audiences might imagine. We cannot reconstruct conversations by the hearth. We cannot give Lisa thoughts about Francesco's habits, temperament, or appearance. But one surviving element matters greatly. Francesco's will provides for Lisa. It orders that her dowry be restored and that provisions be made for her care and housing. The surviving testament is one of the rare moments in which the material structure surrounding their marriage becomes especially clear near its end. A dowry first assembled for a 15-year-old bride now returns to significance more than 4 decades later. This is how time folds back on itself. 500 florins once marked an entrance into marriage. Now the legal and material protections associated with that marriage become part of preparing for widowhood. Money travels through a life without ever being merely money. At 15 it can mean alliance. At 60 it can mean security. A house can do the same. At first it is a place entered, then a place managed, then perhaps a place remembered. Even a key changes its meaning depending on the age of the hand holding it. In 1538, Francesco dies. Lisa is about 59 years old. The event ends the longest relationship of her adult life and alters her legal position immediately. Again, silence is necessary. We do not know the final room. We do not know whether Lisa was present at his last breath. We do not know what words were spoken. The historical record gives us death, will, household arrangements. It does not give us grief in Lisa's own language. So we allow the practices of death in her world to surround the absence without claiming the scene. Death often occurs at home. A sick room may gather family, religious care, linens, food, medicines, candles, and prayer. When death approaches, confession and last rites carry enormous spiritual importance. Afterward, the body must be washed, prepared, clothed, or wrapped according to custom and circumstance. Bells may mark death. Funeral observances connect family, church, charity, burial, and memory. Mourning affects clothing. Masses continue the relationship between the living and the dead within Catholic devotional life. The room that held sickness does not remain a sick room forever. Bedding is changed. Objects are moved. Food returns to ordinary use. The household absorbs the absence. This may be the hardest change a house can make. A chair remains where the person does not. A door no longer opens for the same footsteps. Another person takes responsibility for something that once belonged to the dead. Daily life continues with an almost unbearable practicality, and perhaps that is what allows households to survive loss. Someone still needs water. Someone must still eat. The fire must still be lit. Francesco's death turns Lisa into a widow. Widowhood in Florence is neither one fixed condition nor a simple descent into dependence. A woman's circumstances are shaped by dowry rights, family resources, children, property, age, health, and the provisions of her husband's will. For Lisa, Francesco's arrangements matter. Her sons are instructed to restore her dowry and provide for her. This places her old age within a family structure that does not simply abandon her. Yet a widow is still entering a new social identity. Clothing can change. Public expectations change. The balance between household authority and reliance on adult children changes. Marriage has ended, but the network built during marriage remains around her. And now Sant'Orsola returns to the story. Archival research strongly connects Lisa's final years with the convent where her daughter Camilla, sister Beatrice, had lived. We should remain careful about the exact circumstances of residence. The evidence is stronger for her association with Sant'Orsola than for every detail of how she lived there. So we enter the convent slowly, not as a prison, not as a bare stone cave, not as an escape from the world. A Florentine women's convent is an institution with its own material life. Walls establish boundaries. Bells organize the hours. Prayer structures the day. There are sleeping spaces, a chapel, work areas, food preparation, storage, visitors, religious objects, and routines of maintenance. Women live here. That means laundry must still be washed. Food must still be prepared. Beds must still be arranged. Bodies become ill. Elderly women need care. Water must be carried. Clothing wears out. The sacred and the practical remain intertwined. A bell calls to prayer, while somewhere a vessel still needs cleaning. The contradiction is only apparent. Spiritual life has always depended upon bodies. Bodies require work. Sant'Orsola also remains connected to families beyond its walls. Visitors can enter controlled spaces. Conversation may occur through grilles or within designated parlors. Food and small goods can pass between religious women and relatives. Kinship does not vanish when a woman enters a convent. It changes architecture. A mother and daughter may once have shared a household corridor. Later, their relationship exists across institutional boundaries. And now, in Lisa's widowhood, those boundaries may become part of her own daily environment. Imagine the difference in sound. A merchant household has children, commercial activity, servants, street traffic, family visitors. Household instructions, food preparation, domestic argument, laughter, illness, movement. A convent has many of these human necessities too, but its rhythm is repeatedly gathered by bells and prayer. Time feels more formal here. The canonical hours divide it. The day is not simply morning, midday, evening. It is also a sequence of religious obligations. For an older woman who has already heard bells throughout her entire life, the sound is familiar and different at once. The same metal speaks from another context. A bell heard from the street becomes a bell heard from within walls. The city outside remains Florence, but the distance between individual and city grows slightly. The Arno is still there. Markets continue. Political offices operate. Artisans work. Children are born. People marry. Another generation begins the cycle Lisa is approaching the end of. Yet inside a convent, the world can be filtered. News arrives through visitors, food through institutional systems and family support, sound through walls, light through smaller openings and shared spaces. Prayer provides repetition, and repetition can make the passage of time feel both slower and more visible. Morning prayer, work, meal, prayer again. Another day, another week, a feast, a fast, another season. There is something almost architectural about old age in such a place. The body moves through repeated corridors. The world becomes more bounded. But within that boundary, memory becomes enormous. Lisa can remember a Florence very few younger women around her have known. She was born before Savonarola became the voice of the city. She was already married when the 15th century ended. She was a mature woman when the Medici returned in 1512. She was nearly 50 when they were expelled again. She lived through the siege. Now the city outside belongs increasingly to people younger than she is. This is one of the quietest changes age brings. At first, the future is populated by elders, then by peers, eventually by children. The world becomes younger around you. Even fashion makes the change visible. The clothing of the 1540s is not the clothing of Lisa's adolescence. Silhouettes shift, textile preferences shift, head coverings change, ceramics change, domestic objects slowly alter in style. Some technologies and habits remain almost the same. Others reveal that decades have passed. The city has not frozen in the year Leonardo began his portrait. Neither has Lisa. If we were to place the painted face beside the living woman now, the difference would be enormous. The portrait preserves dark hair, smooth skin, young hands. Lisa is in her 60s. And perhaps this is where the portrait becomes most misleading. Not because it lies, because it tells the truth about only one moment. Every portrait does this. It saves a face by abandoning all the faces that come later. The woman at 24, the woman at 35, the woman at 50, the woman at 63. Only one is preserved, the others belong to memory, and memory is fragile. A child may remember the way an older mother's voice sounded. A daughter may remember a particular expression. A servant may remember a habit. A grandchild may remember a hand. Then those people age, their memories vanish too. Human beings disappear twice, first from the world, then from the people who remember them. An object can interfere with that process. A portrait can interfere dramatically. It can make a face outlive every witness. That is what will happen to Lisa. But she does not know it. This matters enormously. There is no reason to believe the elderly Lisa at Sant'Orsola understood that a painting associated with her would become one of the most famous objects ever made. Whatever she knew of the portrait belonged to a very different scale. She lived before its mythology, before the crowds, before the glass, before reproduction spread the face across books, advertisements, postcards, screens, and every corner of modern visual culture. To her, if she thought of it at all, it belonged to the distant past. The painter himself is dead by now. Leonardo died in France in 1519. His life has ended. The painting has survived him. Already, the object is doing what objects sometimes do, outliving its maker, outliving the moment that created it. Soon it will outlive its subject as well. But in Florence, Lisa's own world remains material and immediate. A bed requires linen. An elderly body requires warmth. A convent room can be cold. A wool blanket has weight. A small lamp gives limited light. A devotional object rests in the hand. Prayer beads move one by one through fingers. The physical repetition is almost perfect for old age. One bead, then another, a prayer, then another. There is no need to hurry. The gesture measures time differently from a clock. It measures by attention. Religious devotion in late life should not be interpreted merely as fear of death. In Lisa's world, prayer has surrounded the entire human lifespan. Birth, marriage, illness, feast days, political crisis, childbirth, mourning, and death all carry religious dimensions. The older woman does not suddenly enter a sacred world. She has always lived inside one. Only the balance may have changed. Fewer household responsibilities, more silence, more dependence on children or institutions, more awareness of death because more people from one's youth are already gone. Again, the record does not let us assign these thoughts specifically to Lisa, but the environment itself is sufficient. Names disappear from daily conversation. Family structures change. Beds become empty. The living remember the dead through masses, charity, prayer, objects, and stories. A woman in her 60s inhabits a city full of invisible people. Parents, siblings, friends, neighbors, children who died young, a husband, a daughter in religious life. Some remain alive, others do not. Time becomes crowded with absence, and yet the atmosphere need not become sorrowful. There is peace in continuity too. A convent garden receives another season. Leaves open, flowers return, rain darkens the walls. Heat settles over Florence. Then the air cools. The same cycles Lisa knew as a child continue without requiring her participation. The world does not need us in order to remain beautiful. Perhaps there is comfort in that. The bells will ring whether anyone listens closely or not. The river will move whether anyone watches it. Morning light will reach a wall in a room where yesterday someone was alive and today someone is gone. Life continues not because it is indifferent, but because continuation is its nature. In 1542, Lisa is around 63 years old. The evidence places her death in connection with Sant'Orsola. Even here, where the chronological record approaches its end. We should resist the temptation to stage the final moment too clearly. We do not know the weather. We do not know whether the room was bright. We do not know who stood beside her. We do not know her last words. We do not even need to choose whether her eyes closed peacefully or whether illness made the final hours difficult. Those details belong to someone who was there, not to us. What we can know is the world around such a death. A bed, linen, prayer, the possibility of religious attendance, candles, a body that has traveled through more than 6 decades of Florentine life, the same body once swaddled as an infant, the same body once dressed as a young bride, the same hands once painted as smooth and still, now older, changed by time in every way paint cannot show. Death will return the room to quiet. Then other hands will perform the necessary work. The body is washed and prepared according to practice. Prayers continue. Burial connects the dead to the religious community and the city. But before we allow Lisa to disappear from these rooms, there is still more time to remain with the living woman rather than the famous image, because the strange afterlife of the portrait has not yet truly begun. And if we move too quickly toward it, we risk committing the same act that history has committed for centuries. We risk turning Lisa back into the Mona Lisa too soon. So for a little longer, let the painting remain elsewhere. Let the young face wait. Here, the older woman still belongs to Florence. The light outside shifts across convent walls. A bell prepares to sound. Someone passes along a corridor carrying something ordinary. Perhaps linen, perhaps food, perhaps water. The exact object does not matter. The act does. Another person is continuing the small work that allows a community to exist, and somewhere within that same rhythm of prayer, footsteps, cloth, stone, and changing light, Lisa Gherardini is nearing the final boundary of the life that the portrait could never contain. The corridor does not know that a life is ending. Stone remains stone. The wall continues to hold the coolness of the building. Somewhere, a door opens and closes. A bell sounds because it is time for a bell to sound. The rhythm of the convent does not stop for one person, just as Florence itself has never stopped for one household, one marriage, one birth, one preacher, one siege, or one painter. And perhaps this is the most peaceful truth waiting at the edge of Lisa's story. The world continues. Not carelessly, not cruelly, simply continuously. A community survives because ordinary actions continue after extraordinary moments. Water is carried after a death. Bread is prepared. Linen is folded. Prayer is spoken again. A candle burns lower and is replaced. Someone younger takes a path through a corridor that an older woman no longer walks. The absence enters gradually. At first, a person is missing from one room, then from a meal, then from a familiar hour, then from the habits of others. The household or community adjusts around the shape that remains. This is what rooms do after human beings leave them. They do not become empty immediately. They retain arrangement: a bed, a chest, a stool, a devotional object, a folded cloth. The objects remain close to the last person who used them, but only for a while. Soon another hand touches them. Something is moved. Something is inherited. Something is given away. Something wears out. Material life begins to loosen itself from memory. Lisa's body belongs now to the religious and funerary customs of her world. The exact details of her last hours are beyond us, but death in her society remains surrounded by prayer, sacrament, family obligations, preparation of the body, burial, and remembrance through masses and devotional practice. The dead are not simply removed from the living. They remain connected through religion. A name may be spoken in prayer. A charitable act may be made for a soul. A mass may carry memory forward. Family continues through obligation even when physical presence has ended. Yet memory within a family has limits. The people who knew Lisa directly will themselves grow old. Her children will carry their own memories. Others will know her through stories. Then even those stories will thin. The woman who spent decades inside Florentine rooms gradually becomes less visible. This would be the ordinary fate of almost everyone born in 1479. A name in a record, a family connection, perhaps a marriage contract, a burial, then silence. But Lisa's story has another object moving through time: the panel. While her own body follows the universal path of age and death, the painted image refuses to participate. It has already survived Leonardo. Now it survives Lisa, and the imbalance between them becomes complete. One is gone. The other still looks outward. The painting does not know that it has become a survivor. It cannot know anything. It is wood, preparation, pigment, oil, labor, and time. Its power exists entirely in the living people who look at it. Yet those people will continue to arrive, generation after generation. The woman will not. This is how an image begins to replace a life. At first, perhaps, the distinction remains visible. The portrait is of Lisa del Giocondo, a Florentine woman, a wife, a mother, someone connected to a particular family and city. But as years become decades and decades become centuries, the personal context grows weaker, while the image grows stronger. The name changes in public memory. Lisa becomes La Gioconda, La Gioconde, Mona Lisa. The human being recedes behind the title. It is a strange transformation. Most portraits become less personal as they age. Faces detach from households. Clothing loses its immediate social meaning. A background becomes merely beautiful. A gesture becomes mysterious because the code that once made it ordinary is no longer familiar. Even stillness becomes strange. People begin to ask questions that the original world may never have asked. Why is she smiling? What is she thinking? What is hidden in the landscape? What secret did Leonardo encode? What illness can be seen in her face? What does the veil mean? Why are her hands arranged this way? The silence of the sitter invites noise from everyone who comes later. This is not unusual. Human beings dislike unanswered faces. We prefer to give them stories, and the less we know, the more confidently imagination can speak. Lisa's actual life protects us from that temptation. It reminds us that mystery is sometimes created simply by distance. A person whose breakfast is known to her family is mysterious 5 centuries later. A gesture that was ordinary becomes symbolic. A garment becomes evidence. A mouth becomes a puzzle. The portrait has not changed nearly as much as the world looking at it. That world becomes more distant from Florence in 1503 with every generation. The meaning of clothing changes. The structure of marriage changes. The position of women changes. Households change. Religion changes. Light changes. Cities change. The human body itself does not become different, but almost everything surrounding it does, and so viewers bring new questions to the same face. The painting becomes a mirror for the curiosity of later centuries. But Lisa herself has no opportunity to answer. Perhaps this is why returning to her ordinary world matters. Because the real woman was not a riddle. She was simply inaccessible to us. Those are not the same thing. A life can be poorly documented without being mysterious to the person who lived it. Lisa knew the people around her. She knew her children. She knew the practical shape of her home. She knew the sounds of Florence more intimately than we ever can. She knew which rooms were warmest, which roads were familiar, which prayers had been repeated so often that the words arrived almost without effort. She knew people whose names may have vanished completely. She possessed knowledge that no archive thought important enough to preserve. That is true of nearly every human life. The most important things are often the least recorded. How a mother looked at a child, the familiar sound of someone's footsteps, the place at a table where one person usually sat, the way a room smelled after rain, the tone of a voice from another floor. No official document needs these details, and yet they are often what make a life feel like a life. History preserves structures. Memory preserves textures. When memory disappears, we are left reconstructing texture from structures. A marriage contract cannot tell us affection. An inventory cannot tell us comfort. A death register cannot tell us grief, but they can keep us near the truth. They tell us what existed. A chest, a dowry, a house, children, a convent, a date. Within those boundaries, we can allow the senses to return without pretending that imagination is evidence. A room is cool because stone can be cool. A lamp is dim because its flame is small. Cloth has weight because wool has weight. A city bell carries across roofs because bronze carries sound. These are modest truths, but modest truths are enough. The Florence beyond Lisa's life continues changing. New buildings rise. Old interiors are altered. Families disappear from one street and appear on another. Fashion moves onward. The political city changes again. The Medici order becomes more firmly established. People born after Lisa's death grow up believing the city they know is the ordinary one. That is another gentle deception of time. Every generation believes the world it enters is simply the world. Only later does it become a period, a style, an era, a subject for museums. For Lisa, the Renaissance is not the Renaissance. It is home. This may be the simplest way to understand her. Not as a woman who lived in a famous age, as a woman who lived in the present. Her present. The distinction matters. She does not wake in the morning thinking that Michelangelo belongs to art history. She does not hear political change and think about future textbooks. She does not understand Leonardo as a universal symbol of genius. These categories belong to us. Her world is filled with people who are alive, then dead, with reputations that rise and fall, with buildings still under construction, with works of art that do not yet know they are masterpieces, with families negotiating tomorrow because tomorrow is uncertain. This is perhaps why the painting itself becomes so different from what it was. A portrait begins as contemporary. It becomes historical only because it survives. The wood ages. The paint changes subtly. Varnish, conservation. Travel, humidity, handling, display, and protection all become part of an existence far longer than Lisa's. The painting moves through collections and eventually into a world of public museum display. Its fame grows unevenly, not all at once. For centuries, it is admired, then reproduced, then discussed more widely, then transformed by modern mass culture into something beyond an artwork, a face everyone recognizes. The paradox becomes almost complete. The less the world knows about Lisa the woman, the more familiar it becomes with Lisa the image. Her portrait can be recognized by people who cannot name her. They know the smile before the biography, perhaps even the smile before Leonardo's name. A human face has escaped its human context, and yet context is still waiting beneath it. Florence, 1479. A financially constrained but respected Gherardini household. A young girl growing among cloth, bells, prayer, kinship, and the changing seasons of the city. Marriage at 15. A new household. Children. Birth and loss. Years of domestic responsibility. A daughter entering religious life. Political change. Siege, widowhood, old age. Sant'Orsola, death. None of these things is visible in the famous painted face. But all of them belong to the woman behind it. And this is where the painting becomes unexpectedly moving. Not because of a hidden secret, because it cannot contain enough. No portrait can. A face is only one surface of a lifetime. Behind it are thousands of mornings, thousands of meals, uncounted footsteps, illnesses, repairs, conversations, waiting, boredom, prayer, heat, cold, family, loss, work, ordinary pleasures that leave no record. Even a masterpiece is too small for a human life. The frame cuts everything away. Perhaps that is why the hands in the painting matter. They are so still. One rests over the other. For centuries, viewers have seen calm there, control, grace. But real hands are rarely still for long. Hands wash, carry, fasten, mend, hold, open, close, count, touch, age. A painted hand never has to do these things again. Lisa's real hands did. We do not know which tasks were hers personally on any given day, and we should preserve that uncertainty. But we know the kind of world those hands inhabited, a world in which objects required care, in which textiles mattered, in which children required adults, in which prayer involved touch, in which keys, vessels, linens, clothing, food, and household goods moved constantly through human hands. The portrait captures rest. Life was motion. And maybe the famous expression is quieter when we remember that. We do not need to solve it. The mouth does not need an explanation. Perhaps the desire to explain has always taken us away from Lisa. A human face naturally contains ambiguity. People rarely hold one emotion at a time. The smallest movement of a mouth can seem different depending on who is looking. Paint can preserve that ambiguity forever. Living people move past it instantly. A smile changes, a gaze turns away. The moment is gone. Leonardo's work holds the moment open, and we keep returning because it never completes itself. But Lisa did complete the moment. She stood up. She left. She returned to Florence. Whatever happened in the room where the portrait was made, she did not remain there. That may be the most important fact of all. She continued for decades. The painting becomes famous precisely by refusing to continue. The woman becomes human precisely because she does. Now, centuries later, Florence itself still contains fragments of the world that knew her. Streets have changed, but their paths sometimes survive. Churches remain while interiors have been altered. Stone carries weather differently now, but still receives rain. The Arno still passes beneath bridges. Bells still move across rooftops. Visitors walk through the city with cameras, maps, schedules, and knowledge of what comes later. They know how the story ends. Lisa never did. No one living in history does. This is why historical imagination becomes gentler when we remove destiny. A child born in 1479 is not born to become the Mona Lisa. She is simply born. A young woman married in 1495 is not walking toward immortality. She is entering marriage. A mother in the early 16th century is not waiting to become an art history question. She is living among children and adults, food and prayer, clothing and work. An older woman approaching death is not thinking of millions of future museum visitors. She is near the end of the only life she knows. Destiny is something later generations place backward onto ordinary time. The person inside the time sees only the next step, and perhaps this is where human and time belongs most naturally, not above history. Inside the next step, the small one, a foot on stone, a hand on wood, a breath in a cold room, a bell heard from somewhere beyond the wall. The next thing, then the next. This is how 63 years pass, not as a biography, as days. If we return for a moment to the beginning, not to restart the story, but simply to feel the distance, the transformation is enormous. A newborn surrounded by cloth and female hands. A girl listening to a city she does not yet understand. a bride entering another household, a young mother recovering in a chamber where new life has just begun, a woman sitting still long enough for a painter to observe her, a mature mother managing the long middle years of family life, a 50-year-old living within a besieged Florence, a widow, an older woman connected with the convent where her daughter had lived. The body passes through every age. The portrait chooses one. There is no victory in either path. The living woman has something the painting can never possess: change. The painting has something the woman can never possess: duration without aging. Each reveals the other. If Lisa had lived forever, the portrait would not feel miraculous. If the portrait aged, it would not hold us in the same way. The distance between them creates the strange beauty of the story. But it is the living side of that distance that matters more, because aging is not failure. Change is not a loss of the true self. The 24-year-old face is not more Lisa than the 60-year-old one. Youth is simply easier to preserve. History often mistakes preservability for importance. Stone over flesh, paint over voice, documents over memory. We should be careful not to make the same mistake. So instead of ending beside the painting, we can remain in Florence, not necessarily on the exact day of Lisa's death, not necessarily inside the final room, just within the city that held her life. The light shifts gradually. Somewhere a woman is washing linen, a child is learning words, a merchant is counting, a nun is moving toward prayer. A servant carries water, someone is closing shutters, someone is opening them. A family is preparing a marriage, another is preparing for burial. Bread enters an oven, a fire settles into ash. Rain begins against roof tiles, then stops. None of these people know Lisa as a historical figure. Some may know the Gherardini name. Some may know the Del Giocondos. Some may have met her. Most have not. The famous face has not yet swallowed the woman. She is simply one of the dead of Florence, and there is peace in allowing her to be ordinary again. Fame can be noisy. Ordinary life is quieter. A name rests in records. A body rests in the earth. A family continues. The city continues. The painting continues too, but we no longer need to follow it. It will make its own long journey. It will cross borders, enter collections, receive attention, survive, become famous, become almost impossibly famous. People will stand in front of it and wonder who she was. And for a moment, perhaps, they may imagine that the answer must be hidden somewhere inside the paint. But the answer was never there. It was in the 63 years outside the frame, in rooms, in streets, in childbirth, in linen, in winter, in prayer, in children's voices, in the political noise of Florence fading through walls, in ordinary meals, in aging, in loss, in the slow transfer of responsibility from one generation to another. The painting gives us Lisa's face. Time gives us everything the face cannot hold. And now the city is growing darker, not into an ending, only into another portion of the day. A bell sounds. The note travels over rooftops, and through the spaces between buildings. It reaches homes where lamps are being lit. It reaches convent walls. It reaches the river. Then the sound thins and disappears. Another will come later. There is always another sound, another morning, another person opening a door, another child entering the world. In some room, a piece of linen is folded into a chest. The lid lowers. A key turns. Years later, someone else will open it. Perhaps they will know who first owned the cloth. Perhaps they will not. The object will continue for as long as it can. Then it too will disappear. Nothing needs to last forever to have mattered. Lisa did not need the portrait's immortality in order to have lived completely. She was here before the mystery, before the fame, before the crowd, before the name Mona Lisa became larger than the name Lisa Gherardini. For a little while, she belonged entirely to her own time, and Florence belonged to her. The bells, the stone, the changing weather, the households waking behind closed shutters, the warm place beside the fire, the cool church interior, the weight of wool, the smoothness of linen worn soft with use, the brief brightness of a candle, the sound of rain finding its way along roofs and streets. The ordinary world, the only world anyone ever truly lives in. Somewhere beyond all of this, the painted woman is still waiting. Her hands are still folded. Her face is still young. She will wait for centuries, but Lisa no longer has to. The city carries on without asking anything more of her. And as the last light fades from one old Florentine wall, another room nearby is already preparing for tomorrow.